Hello and welcome to this edition of Arlington Public News. I'm Paul Werlin.
And I'm Erin Dixon in for Michelle Marino.
At Arlington Public News, we bring you stories of interest to Arlington and surrounding communities. In tonight's newscast, we discuss maintaining privacy and safety online. We talk with author Alan Johnson about his memoir, and we learn ways to keep your dogs healthy during the summer months.
Plus, the unveiling of the newly restored Cyrus Dallin sculpture. That and more coming up next. Please stay with us.
Town officials and residents say they don't have enough information from developers of the proposed Mugar housing project, even after a special Board of Selectmen public meeting on Thursday, August 12th. Oak Tree Development is proposing a 219-unit housing development on the open land near Thorndyke Field and Route 2. As a 40B affordable housing development, owners can bypass certain town bylaws, but opposition to the project remains widespread, including among town officials. APN was at the meeting and has this report.
I'm Brenda Mahoney for APN here at Town Hall. This is the second time that the developers of the proposed housing project have gone before the public. The first time in May to much protest. And as we discovered here tonight, not much has changed.
If they promised no impact to the schools, if they promised better flood relief, if they were saying it wasn't, from what I hear, they're saying it's not going to impact. Nothing's going to change. I want to hear it's going to get better. So if they're going to develop, I want it to be an improvement.
I see mothers with their kids going down Mary Street, which is the drag strip in the morning, okay? And they go down there walking with their baby carriages and little 4-year-olds going to the Hardy School. And I've seen road rage at the bike path and on Mary Street at the intersection of Little John. I've seen T-bone collisions there. We don't need any more activity down there.
10 acres is a big chunk of land, and to be able to not only have paths that go across it, but actually gradually improve it. And one of the people on our team, who's not here tonight, but he's a naturalist, has said that he would devise a program that would annually make it even a better and more accessible place right now. As you know, right now, there are homeless people there. It's got poison ivy. You can't walk through it. There's no asset to it. There was a mention about schools and so on. This kind of housing tends to be more attractive to people who are older, maybe retired or empty nesters, and also younger people who are either single or starting their professional life and for whom the T is a big thing. And for the older people, it's more the amenity of being able to stay in Arlington with housing that is available.
There's some vague claims in the proposal that this building can make the situation at this wetlands, or in this property, in specific the wetlands, better. The supporting documents are inconsistent in terms of the number of wetlands that are being described. And I am utterly unconvinced that the map of the FEMA line is correct at this point. You're saying that you're going to make the site better and simultaneously saying, I don't want to follow the Arlington wetlands bylaws is absolutely inconsistent.
Our intent is to make it better, and if we can't make it better and we don't follow the state regulations, we don't have a project and we can be denied. That's our burden. Forget the fact that we're saying it'll be better. We have to demonstrate it, as you've indicated. And that's our burden to do that.
It is disingenuous and totally unacceptable for an applicant to come here with preliminary plans that are as gross a preliminary set of plans as I've ever seen and say, don't worry, we'll deal with the details at the Board of Appeals level. Because at that level, the burden has shifted to the town of Arlington. It's impossible to discern any depth of this project. And it's not acceptable for an applicant to tell the Board of Selectmen, don't worry, the details will be worked out with the Board of Appeals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are one of the most dense communities in the state, and 95% of it is residential. So I don't need to be preached upon about more housing. We support affordable housing. We look forward to working with Oak Tree, the Board of Selectmen, and anyone else to make sure that we work on affordable housing, but not in this environmentally sensitive area. Thank you.
Town officials will take comments from tonight's meeting and submit a report to Mass Housing. If approved, it then goes on to Arlington's Zoning Board of Appeals. Brenda Mahoney for Arlington Public News.
In our last newscast, we heard from Brianna Wu, a video game developer who has been repeatedly targeted for speaking out against the negative depiction of women in video games and the sexist culture of Gamergate. Today, Brianna shares the experience of having her privacy and finances compromised online.
Hi, I am here with Brianna Wu, and we want to follow up on her recent conversations in Arlington and other venues by digging in a little bit deeper to the question of online privacy, protecting yourself and your identity, and what happens when you are subject, as Brianna has been, to the kinds of harassment and threatening that she has found herself subject to. So Brianna, thanks.
Lovely. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
I know that in the fields of libel and slander, which is not exactly what we're talking about here, but nonetheless, that gives fewer protections to somebody.
It does.
Do you find that that's been the case also with what you're dealing with in terms of this online harassment?
You know, I would be, for legal purposes, considered a limited purpose public figure, which is a different classification of it. So you can look at my background as it relates to the thing I'm a public figure about, but like, you know, my marriage would probably be off limits, you know, things about my private life would be.
Would and should be off
correct.
limits.
But you know, the sad part is that doesn't really, it's a hard thing to actually go through. Like I've certainly thought about, you know, bringing lawsuits against some of the people that have defamed me. And the truth is it's so expensive and it's so time consuming that there's only so much stuff I can do.
What have you learned and what can you share with people about how to protect yourself going forward?
Sure. I think there's kind of a blame the victim mindset with this sometimes. Like if you'd been a little bit more careful, you know, you would not have had your private information out there. So I want to be very clear in talking with your viewers today. There is no course of action anyone can take where they can be 100% safe. You can certainly be smart about it. There are certain things you can do to basically be as safe as possible. Anyone out there needs to be using strong passwords. And that is a step anyone out there needs to be taken. But there's no magic course of action where you can say, well, I've done the right steps here and I'm not going to be a target. Engineers build societies. Engineers built the aqueducts, you know, way back when, and now the frontiers that we are moving in as a human race, you have software engineers that are inventing the future of where we all communicate, how we share ideas, how we talk to each other, how we buy things. So when we are talking about women in tech, the fundamental question that we are asking ourselves is, do women get to have a hand in building the future of the human race? Because right now, it is a very small set of people that get to build the communities that we talk in, that get to build the protocols that keep us safe, that get to set the policies deciding what is private, what is not. So we are really talking about something that is huge and extremely important here.
I want to thank you for the conversation. It's been illuminating, certainly not very encouraging in a number of respects, but nonetheless important to get all of this out on the table, in the air, et cetera. Seems like bringing as much light as possible to these issues is maybe our only recourse at this point. I agree with
that. It's imperative. Thank you for having me on.
As we have just heard, the internet can be a tool used for criminal or fraudulent behavior, often making it difficult to navigate safely. APN spoke with Arlington Police Captain Richard Flynn about online safety, how to avoid scams, and what to do if your personal information is stolen.
The internet is a two-sided coin. On one hand, it brings convenience to people's life. On the other hand, it can also be the source of many problems. Today, we have Captain Flynn to discuss online safety issues in Arlington. How do cybercrimes affect Arlington residents?
What we see is people tend to share more information than they probably should. And in doing so, they open themselves up for problems. There's a difference between when you go out looking for a service versus when someone either calls you or sends you an email or even, you know, a stranger who knocks on your door. You're not really 100% sure who you're talking to at that time. And we like to, you know, just suggest to people, just take a step back and just always be a little bit cautious in regards to that. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a telephone call or on the internet. If you receive an email from someone who you really don't know, who says that maybe they have a service that they might want to provide, or you've won a lottery or something of that nature, we always say, be a little bit cautious and just take small steps. And you want to really hold your personal information close to the vest.
Are there any age groups that are more affected than others by these crimes?
Different problems kind of geared towards different age groups. I think the elderly population in town or in other communities who have access to computers or generally, they use them regularly, they're susceptible to scams and problems on the internet because they're a trusting group, and they might be a little bit more liberal with their information in communicating with people they don't know and sharing things with people they don't know. The younger people just thrive to get their information out there. They want people to know what they're doing, where they're going on vacation, and what they had for dinner. And so that population they just put information out there, and that in itself can become a problem. When you create a social media account or when you're out there sharing your information, you need to be careful, because once it's out there, and we can't get it back. If someone gains it, that we can't get it back. But then we can take the steps to rectify, and if there's a crime that takes place, we'll take those steps to try and bring that person to justice. We just ask people to use good common sense, whatever age you are. Just use good common sense and hold your personal information close to the vest. Be careful, just be careful with who you share information with.
What resources are available to victims?
We ask them to come to the police department, of course, and any cases of identity theft or an online crime that could have happened, or even online harassment, you can come to us, and we will take you through that, whatever that may be. We'll do our best to take you through that and make you right by it.
On behalf of Arlington Police Department, for Arlington Public News, I'm Yigu Liang.
The internet can be such a helpful tool, but we definitely need to be cautious when using it.
Absolutely, and it's definitely necessary that we all take precautions to keep all of our personal information as safe as possible. In our next segment, producer Peter Bermudez talks with author Alan Johnson via Skype about his new memoir, chronicling the search for a place to lay his father's ashes.
When Alan Johnson asked his dying father where he wanted his ashes placed, he responded without hesitation that it made no difference to him at all. Ultimately troubled by this response, Johnson set off on a 2,000-mile journey across the upper Midwest to find the place where his father's ashes belonged. But along the way, Alan came to question where it is that he belongs. With me today to discuss this journey, the questions it posed, and the answers it yielded, is Alan Johnson. To bury your father's ashes. I've set it up a bit, but can you tell us a bit more about how that story evolved?
I asked him several years before he died, at the ripe age of 93, almost accidentally, just where do you want to have your ashes placed? And he didn't take any time to think about it. He shrugged and he said, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me at all. And at the time, that didn't strike me as somehow a problem. But then years went by and I still had his ashes sitting in this box in my house, and increasingly felt I have to do something with them. And then discovered that I had no idea, in the absence of guidance from him, what to do with them. And so that put it in my mind that I couldn't get it out. And then the longer it was in my mind, the more the question came in alongside it, which is, well, where would I belong? When I die, what do I tell my kids to do with me? So I picked the only route that made any sense, which was starting with his late childhood, high school years, which was in South Dakota, and then going backwards in time. But what I encountered by taking this almost 2,000-mile journey was that there's a kind of belonging, a sense of being from somewhere that I had never even thought of before, which is in relation to land. And it's in relation to belonging to a people, an identifiable people, whose identity is in part bound with a particular place, a particular piece of land. I mean, by land, I don't mean just, America, the land or whatever. I mean those mountains over there, these plains here, this river, that kind of identification. I'm like anybody else. I want to feel good about my ancestors because in some ways I see myself as an extension of them. So I want to feel proud of them, for example. I want to think that they were good people. I can imagine that they were. But the fact is that their lives, if only their silence, their complicity in what was happening in the United States, their lives are bound up with some horror. And as an American, I have to see how I am connected to all of that. Because if I'm not connected to all of that, then it doesn't mean anything to say that I am an American. So on the one hand, yes, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel ashamed about any of that history. I don't feel ashamed of my ancestors. But as an American citizen, I also feel an obligation to be responsible to that past. So I feel an obligation to those events, to that history, to the whole story of this country. And I also feel a sense of obligation to my ancestors, to do what I can in the present time to, if you will, to make it right, or to help to make it right, what was done then.
For Alan Johnson, I'm Peter Bermudez for Arlington Public News.
Calling all poets, Arlington recently appointed its first poet, and now you've got a chance to share your wordsmith abilities. Poet laureate Miriam Levine organized the town's first poetry contest. Residents can submit poems no longer than 35 lines in length by October 30th. Submissions will be judged by award-winning poet Alan Feldman, and winners will be announced in November. To submit, mail poems with cover letter to Arlington Poetry Prizes, care of John Lane, 26A Academy Street, Arlington, Mass. 02476.
On August 9th, the Cyrus Dallin Art Museum held its annual fundraising event and unveiled the latest addition to its impressive collection of Dallin's Native American sculptures. This piece, titled On the Warpath, was restored by Dr. Daniel Fairbanks and can now be viewed at the museum. News intern Eve Liu brings us highlights of the event and an up-close look at the restored sculpture.
Hi, I'm here at Whitmore Robinson's house tonight at the summer soiree held by Cyrus Dallin Art Museum. On this fundraising event, we're going to witness the unveiling of the restored Dallin sculpture On the Warpath.
One of the reasons why I like to celebrate Cyrus Dallin is because for me, who just came from Utah about 5 years ago, this connects me between the West and the East. And Cyrus Dallin does that so well.
I've been working on this piece for about 2 years, and but not full time. It's been on and off, but it was in pretty bad shape, and so it was a pretty long restoration. Some of the difficulties were the fact that I'm working with plaster that is probably about a century old. And so it's very soft, very fragile plaster. And then also it had quite a bit of damage to it and was in pieces. And so I needed to attach the pieces in a way that brought them back into the place that they were originally, and then be able to secure them so that they will not come apart. And then also to patch up the seams so that it appears to be a completely intact piece the way Dallin intended it to be. But I was very pleased with the way it turned out.
My husband, Dr. Daniel Fairbanks, is a fourth-generation visual artist, sculptor, and painter. Since we've been married, we've had many opportunities to combine my talent, which is a musical talent, with his talent, which is an artistic talent, at several events. And it's just another wonderful event for us to celebrate those two arts together.
The Dallin Museum is one of the most remarkable small museums, but with large ambitions and large plans of preservation of Dallin's art and the presentation to the public in a very beautiful historic building here in Arlington.
It's one of those wonderful things about artists and people who do things not for the money, but for things they love to do. And there's lots of people in Arlington who do things for the town because they love to do what they do, and that money is not the first thing, it's giving back that's the first thing.
When I go to the Museum of Fine Arts and I see his
Indian on the horse, I was always impressed with it. And then to find out that man lived here for 40 plus years. And I live here now, and I'm proud of it.
For Arlington Public News, I'm Eve Liu.
He's definitely one of our most famous citizens.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know this, but one of Dallin's sculptures sits in the Oval Office in the White House.
Wow, that's great.
That's how famous he is.
Now we bring you part 2 of a series on the issue of adolescent body image. In this segment, young women talk about how they deal with the pressure to reflect a certain standard of beauty and the effects of negatively focusing on personal appearance.
Hello and welcome. My name is Maya Sears. We will be talking about body image and the negative perception many teenage girls have of their appearance and selves.
Well, I think when you're in high school, you're really susceptible to what other people think about you. And so to have these images or people who you want to embody look this certain way or say that you're supposed to look a certain way can really affect growing girls and boys.
There was this whole way that we were expected to hold ourselves in ballet. You know, your stomach should be tucked and your legs are always supposed to look a certain way. And I think that a lot of times in media too is, you know, you're expected to kind of have this little tiny itty bitty waist, but you know, it could be a little bit curvy and, you know, have your legs not be too thick, but they can't be too thin.
So it's sort of like a very small, narrow way of like what's acceptable.
We're finding ourselves in high school and we don't really know that much, and then we're placed, all these things are being thrown at us, all these things that we're supposed to look like, and we don't really know what to do with them, so we kind of take them as personally and as negatively as we possibly can.
I sometimes catch myself looking at somebody and being like, oh my gosh, is she wearing like a maxi dress and a sweatshirt? What is she doing, you know?
So I think it really affects high schoolers and what they spend their time thinking on instead of school. You know, maybe they're thinking about how they look or how other people are perceiving their image.
I guess a lot of my personal experience is like catching myself judging other girls about what they're wearing instead of like who they are.
I'd be standing in front of a mirror for, you know, 2 hours at a time, you know, 4 days a week, and just, you know, just a leotard. You can see every hug and curve, you can see everything about yourself, and you're just staring at yourself. And my teacher would just say, oh, like, you know, hold your stomach, or stand up a little bit straighter, hold your neck a certain way, you know, always be looking for the things that are wrong and fix them. I was just purely looking at my body in the mirror. I was no longer looking at how I was moving. And after that, there was really nothing else I could do, and that was all I could see. And, you know, something that had been my passion for so long became something that was really unhealthy for me. And I think that, you know, a lot of people go through that, a lot of dancers. That's why eating disorders are so common among ballerinas especially, because, you know, even Balanchine was like, well, this is how you're supposed to look, and if you don't, you can't dance with me.
How do you think we can create a more attainable standard of beauty?
I think if social media stops putting such a pressure on physical appearance. These days they're trying to be more accepting about different weights, but I feel like that's still not helping enough because it's still that physical appearance that you're judging on instead of like intellect or sense of humor or like your personality.
In an ideal world, that's a hard question. I guess I would say that to see the beauty in your own self. So to see, you know, inner beauty, and you can also appreciate what you have on the outside. I mean, that's not to say that you shouldn't think you're beautiful on the outside as well, because that's a hugely important thing to cultures and to feminism. But to realize that it comes from more than that. It comes from confidence, and it comes from, you know, a sense of self, not just from what everyone else is supposed to look like.
This is Maya Sears reporting for Arlington Public News.
Did you get a chance to see this week's Shooting Stars? It was quite a show. APN stayed up late to bring you this report.
Hello and welcome. My name is Gayatri Sundarajan, and today we're here to see the Perseid showers. So this phenomenon happens every year. We're lucky because last year there was actually a supermoon, so we couldn't actually see the Perseid showers. Perseids are caused by the comet Swift-Tuttle, which basically leaves debris that hits the Earth's atmosphere and burns up, creating streaks of light, which we see as shooting stars. For Arlington Public News, this is Gayatri and Jay Sundarajan at the Perseid showers.
After this New England winter, we certainly are welcoming the warm summer months, but the heat can be dangerous to pets. The president of A-Dog shares advice on keeping your dog healthy and hydrated, as well as how to recognize other dog diseases.
I'm Igu Liang here at Thorndike Dog Park with A-Dog President Susan Doctorow. Since the temperature gets higher now, what advice would you like to give pet parents to keep their dogs healthy?
What's really important is you should not leave your dog in the car. They can get very hot in the car. The temperature can change by 20 degrees in 10 minutes. Make sure they have water. Make sure they're in the shade whenever possible. If you go for a walk, bring water. These things are extremely important because this can be fatal to dogs. They're very vulnerable to heat.
After introducing her water device, which protects dogs from dehydrated, Susan also shared some signs and diseases of dogs that pet parents need to be aware of.
If they're behaving differently and less energetically, you definitely want to contact your veterinarian. Another sign is vomiting. If they vomit a couple times, it's probably fine. But if it's going on too long, like more than a few times, I would again consult your vet and see if you should try a dietary change at home or if your dog needs to be tested. There's several diseases that are spread by ticks. It's important, especially if you've been in the woods or in an area with brush, the local parks, to inspect your dog for ticks so that they're not subject to these diseases. And I have a little device here. It's a tick removal device. It actually works extremely well. It's a little spoon with a notch. You can buy it at the pet store. It works on people too. The other thing is mosquitoes spread heartworm. It's very, very important that your dogs are on heartworm preventative because that is a fatal disease. And your vet, I'm sure all of our viewers with dogs are keeping their dogs on monthly heartworm preventative, but this is very important. And summer and walking in the woods is mosquito season, so we want to be careful about that. If you do bring your dogs around water, like brooks and ponds, there's a disease called leptospirosis. And that too is a very dangerous disease. And please talk to your vet about it and about the vaccine and whether it's indicated for your dog because it's spread by wildlife in water, bodies of water. So I don't want to scare everybody. Get out there with your dogs, but be careful. Our dog park does allow toys and balls, but there are some dogs who are very safe and playful, but they protect toys and balls, and that's called resource guarding. So please pay attention. If you're playing ball with your dog and somebody says, "My dog is a resource guarder, can you please put the ball away?" Please put the ball away.
Thank you, Susan, for talking with us today.
Thank you, Igu. Thank you for inviting me.
With A-Dog for Arlington Public News, I'm Igu Liang.
It really is important that we take care of our dogs during the warm summer months, not just kids and the elderly.
Right, and not just dogs, all of our pets, for so many of us, they really are part of our family. Thank you for joining us this week as we highlight local events and issues around Arlington. Check out our latest segments on the web at news.acmi.tv.
Please join us next time for another edition of Arlington Public News. I'm Paul Werlin.
And I'm Erin Dixon. See you next time.